On ASEAN Highlight this week, we take a look at the political development in Thailand as the kingdom is counting down to a general election on July 3rd. The election season in Thailand gets underway this week as Thai political parties' party list registration commenced on Thursday morning. Leaders of 26 political parties in Thailand took part in a drawing of candidacy number at the Thai-Japanese Youth Center in Bangkok Dindang district. Abhisit Wongcha-um, the current interim prime minister and the leader of the Democrat Party, drew number 10 for his party, while his arch-rival Pheu Thai Party, led by its leader Yongyut Vichaidit, drew number 1. As politicians and pundits count down to the July 3rd election, Thai political scientist Dr. Thitinan Pongsuthirarak see the upcoming poll as a release of political tension rather than a lasting solution, saying that the structure of Thai politics need to be reformed to facilitate the transformation that the kingdom is currently undergoing.
Thailand has been stuck in this polarization, crisis, turmoil, underpinned by periodic violence for the last 6 years. In fact, the last decade has seen a very topsy-turvy environment in Thai politics. The elections that we're seeing set for July 3rd will provide some release. Without elections, there will be many problems. It will be a dead end. But the elections themselves are unlikely to resolve the crisis. It will buy some time, but the structure of Thai politics has to somehow be reformed. And if that can be done, then whether we have elections, when, how frequent, will not be as much of a problem. So somehow the fundamental mechanics are still very much problematic, but the elections will buy a bit of time, find some release for the short term, but in the medium term, a few months after the elections, we're likely to return to a period of brinkmanship and crisis and turmoil again. This is Thailand's endgame, you know, the end of Thailand as we know it, a kind of a transformation that we all Thais have an interest in seeing that it is peaceful, workable, and allows Thailand eventually to move forward.
Ironically, perhaps, the first day of political parties' party list registration fall on the same day as the anniversary of the deadly military crackdown that ended the prolonged anti-government protests of the Red Shirt United Front for Democracy against dictatorship that dragged on from March 12 to May 19th last year. While the Thursday rally was a commemorative event that ended peacefully that same night, the show of force by the Red Shirt and their closing down of the Ratprasong intersection reflect the continued political tension that existed in the country between various fractions and the perceived social unfairness that is being felt by certain groups of people. It is also a grim reminder of the polarization that, if stoked by prejudices and demagoguery rhetoric, could turn into violence, confrontation and turmoil. As the political game is currently being shaped by the election campaigns of politicians across the country, it is the specter of the kingdom's street politics, past and present, that the movers and shakers need to be mindful of in order to judge for themselves the chasm that the people in government after July 3rd need to bridge. As the supporters of the UDE Red Shirt commemorate 1-year anniversary of the military crackdown on their protests last year, Thailand is counting down to the July 3rd election. Uncertainty remains in the country, and it remains to be seen how the political crisis will resolve itself in the future. I'm Panu Wongcha-um of Thai News Agency, reporting for ASEAN TV. Singapore Minister Mentor Lee Kuan Yew has decided to quit his cabinet minister post after a slight dip in popularity of the ruling People's Action Party, bringing an end to an era for the island state.
Singapore's veteran statesman Lee Kuan Yew decided to leave his son's government cabinet, along with another of the island state's former Prime Minister Goh Chok Tong, after the 87-year-old minister Mentor have had some row in the governing of the country in the last 52 years. His and senior minister Goh Chok Tong resignations marked an end to an era in Singapore's politics, dominated by the People's Action Party's old guards. Lee said his move would pave way for a clean state and for the younger generation to carry Singapore forward in a more difficult and complex situation. On Wednesday this week, Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong announced a new cabinet lineup by shuffling the PAP frontbenchers around, while the ruling party was still coming to terms with their biggest loss of popularity since the island state's separation from Malaysia in 1965. Despite retiring from the government's cabinet, the man who has casted a long shadow over Singapore's politics and history of nation building will still have some public role, as he will become senior advisor to the Government of Singapore Investment Corporation, or GIC, while Goh Chok Tong will be appointed senior advisor to the Monetary Authority of Singapore. The stepping down of Lee Kuan Yew was seen by many as a reflection of the changing political landscape of Singapore and a generational shift in political awareness and outlook of the Lion City's electorate, as demonstrated by the recently held general election. As his party still retains a very strong position as the island state's single-party government, changes are certainly in the air, as the man who was responsible for Singapore's meteoric rise in the international community over the last 50 years decided to call it a day.
The Myanmar government has recently granted amnesty to over 14,000 prisoners nationwide in a move that observers see as a token gesture in appeasing international demand for reform in the country. More in this report. Amnesty introduced this week by the new government of Myanmar, resulting in the release or the reduction of prison sentences of some prisoners, did very little to convince the regime's critics around the world about Naypyiaw's sincerity in reforming the country's political system. The move came after the United Nations Special Envoy Vijay Nambiar visited Myanmar and called for the release of all political prisoners. Initially, it was reported that more than 14,000 prisoners were released across the Southeast Asian country on Tuesday, but right activists said most of these were common criminals rather than political prisoners. Observers see the release of prisoners and the reduction of prison terms as token gesture aimed at appeasing international criticism on the lack of reform that has taken place in the country since the November 7 election last year. They say that the clemency program only goes to show that nothing has changed in the country and that the power that be show no intention to seriously reform the country's political system. Western countries have continued to impose economic sanctions on Myanmar even after the installation of a civilian government in Naypyidaw and the release of the long-time democratic champion Daw Aung San Suu Kyi from house arrest late last year. Many of Myanmar's Southeast Asian neighbors also shown some uneasiness towards Naypyidaw's lack of progress in the country's political reform as ASEAN moved closer towards regional economic integration targeted for the year 2015. Thai political scientist Dr. Thitinan Pongsuthirak gave us his view on how ASEAN could respond to the prospect of having Myanmar becoming the chair of ASEAN in 2014.
Myanmar's role in ASEAN has been a daunting challenge from the outset since Burma at the time joined ASEAN more than 10 years ago. And a few years ago we saw that with the rotational basis, the rotational modality of ASEAN, Myanmar skipped its chairmanship due to various reasons, human rights, democracy. The international community did not accept Myanmar. It just was an outcast. Now, with the elections that Myanmar undertook recently, it has a constitution, it has on paper some semblance of democratic rule, even though the military is still very much in charge. The military appears to have just basically changed clothes to civilians and still call the shots. But there have been some concessions. I think we have to look for more concessions from Myanmar. If they release some of the political prisoners, we have to look also at the opposition groups, how they respond, especially Aung San Suu Kyi. So I think what will happen is that ASEAN will put this issue off. The way that ASEAN works is that they will work behind the scenes. If Myanmar continues to make progress on the road of democratization, human rights, by releasing prisoners, by allowing continued freedom of movement for Aung San Suu Kyi, opposition groups and so on, and if that happens, then it could make a case that is reforming, is mending its ways, and that it deserves to now reclaim its chairmanship of ASEAN after Cambodia. This could be a daunting challenge that could cost a lot of political capital and diplomatic goodwill for ASEAN if it's not handled with finesse.
Dr. Titinan said during the interim period leading up to 2014, Myanmar need to show more improvement in terms of its political reform, or else Naypyidaw's chairmanship of ASEAN could have a dire consequences to the association's international standing.
It depends on what happens in the interim. All things being equal, if Myanmar is still at this stage when it takes over the chairmanship, if it is allowed to do so, then I think that it would be a crippling event for ASEAN, because the ASEAN dialogue partners, the ASEAN summits, the various summits, the ASEAN engagements with the outside world would be subverted in that case. So I think in the interim, Myanmar would have to demonstrate its commitment to democracy and human rights according to the ASEAN norms and the ASEAN rules. And we've seen ASEAN is transforming itself in many ways through the ASEAN Charter. So it depends. They have to make much more progress on the ground. On paper, they've made some progress. If they make more progress on the ground to match the rhetoric, to match the facade, then we could see more goodwill. There is some policy reviews by the United States, by the European Union. They are reconsidering their positions vis-a-vis Myanmar, and it's a kind of a carrot and stick approach. They will have some rewards, they will have some punitive measures. Myanmar is a problematic country for ASEAN all along, but it has a constitution now, it had the elections, and even though it's been controversial, but it's changing in its own way. Whether those changes will be enough to satisfy the expectations of the international community, we will have to see. And also ASEAN will have to see that Myanmar changes reforms sufficiently to accommodate and to be consistent with ASEAN standards.
Visak, or known in Thai as Visakha Busha, is now recognized worldwide for being the day that marks the birth, enlightenment and death of Lord Buddha. More from our news team on this celebration.
Thai Buddhists across the country are seen making merits and performing religious rites throughout the day before the picturesque candle procession ceremony at night on Visakha Busha Day. An almsgiving ceremony was held at Saket Temple, where Buddhist faithful offered 85 monks food and necessities. At another temple, Pat Ram Kao, devout Buddhists also gave alms to 135 monks in the morning, followed by prayers and the reciting of Buddha's teachings. People in the capital are also seen attending a religious event at an army barrack, organized by the Metropolitan Administration or BMA, where about 220 monks collected alms from Buddhism devotees, coinciding with the Buddhism Promotion Week. Then after the sunset on Visakha Busha Day, Buddhists across the country joined in a ceremony to honor the day by lighting candles and circulating clockwise around the temple's main chapels to pay respect to the three holy gems, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Meanwhile, the Crowned Prince Mahawashiralongkorn presided over a royal ceremony at the Emerald Buddha Temple inside the Grand Palace on behalf of King Bhumibol Adulyadej. The Crowned Prince then paid homage to the Emerald Buddha image, made merits, recited the Buddhist prayers before leading other members of the royal family along with top government officials in a candle procession around the chapel. A celebration of candle procession was as well organized on Tuesday night for the 112th anniversary of the Buddha's relic enshrinement at the Golden Mount Temple's pagoda. Let's now turn our eyes and ears to witness the beautiful tradition in the northern Phayao province. Though the morning of this province started with almsgiving and merits making on the bank of Phayao Lake, yet the ceremony to mark the Visakha Busha Day is held at a 500-year-old temple submerged under the Phayao Lake, known as Kuan Yew. And instead of walking, Devotees paddle boats to circle around a remaining stupa still above the surface. The site has been a tourist attraction, boasting the one-of-a-kind candlelit procession on water. Meanwhile, to get in the mood of the celebration of the Visak Day, the entire Sri Lanka celebrates the 2600th Sri Sambuddhadva Jayanti, beginning on the Visak full moon Poya Day, which falls on May 17th. Sri Lankans were seen joining in religious activities such as meditation programs in celebrating the Sri Sambuddhadva Jayanti held at all temples and Buddhist monasteries island-wide. President Mahinda Rajapaksa on Saturday declared the Sri Sambuddhadva Jayanti year to begin from the Visak full moon day at the Anuradhapura Jayasi Mahabodhi and noted that a series of programs were in store to celebrate this landmark event throughout this year under state patronage. Colombo City has 18 special Visak zones where a host of programs, including Bhakti Gi recitals and lantern competitions, are to be held. All Buddhist temples in the country were requested by the Sambuddhadva Jayanti Presidential Operation Committee to mark the dawn of the 2600th Sri Sambuddhadva Jayanti on May 17th. By ringing temple bells from 5:45 p.m. to 5:50 p.m. The committee said the period from Visak Poya Day this year to that of 2012 has been declared as the 2600th Sri Sambuddhadva Jayanti year, so all Buddhists should lead their lives according to the Buddhist teachings. Also known as the Day of Visak, Visakha Busha is celebrated in traditional Buddhist communities around the world. It falls on May 17th, the full moon day of the 6th lunar month, but the date varies according to different traditions. ASEAN TV News Team of Thai News Agency reporting for ASEAN TV.
And that's it for this edition of ASEAN Highlight. On behalf of Thai News Agency ASEAN News Desk, I hope you all have a lovely weekend and Swadee Krap.